Holy City Center Radio. It is episode 102, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Wednesday, March 29th, 2023. Hope your week is off to a good start. Things are going pretty well here. Just a quick little, what I'm watching update, which I'm sure you all have been waiting with bated breath to know what series I'm watching now. But not a long description here, but I'm watching The Mandalorian season 3. Obviously, if you're a Star Wars fan, you're probably already watching as well. But in any event, few episodes into the season, it's been good. Definitely like it. We'll see where the season goes, but I've been happy with it so far. It's a really solid series. Even if you're not super into Star Wars, you don't need to know a ton about any of the movies to enjoy this show. It certainly doesn't hurt. It gives you some background on some of the planets and a handful of characters that you hear about or see, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it's still an enjoyable show even if you don't actually know much about Star Wars. But I'm certainly enjoying it, and I'm sure anybody else out there who enjoyed the first 2 seasons are doing the same. Let's see. Outside of that, not too much going on. Been a pretty quiet week so far. No complaints about that. No fun adventures yet, like last week with going to a concert early in the week. So much quieter for me here. I did get my hair cut, so that's pretty exciting, right? Speaking of, I went and saw my friends Shannon and Jen. They are out on Kiowa Island, a fairly new place called the Salon at Kiowa. They're at One Beach Walker Drive. There's like a gas station just to the right of them when you pull into the plaza, and if you're looking at that plaza, they're on the left side, and fairly new business, but doing an amazing job. Men's cuts, women's cuts. They offer all sorts of other services. There is like a medical spa type business attached to them as well, for some of those offerings. So yeah, definitely look into them. They've been, doing a great job, even though it's still pretty new, but they're doing awesome, and been very happy with my haircut there. And I definitely wouldn't be talking about them if I was not happy. Not that I am asking for anything difficult. I'm probably the easiest customer she has, but I certainly wouldn't be talking about them if I didn't actually like them. So I'm not just saying that because I'm friends with them. But in any event, that's all that's been really going on here. Hope things are good where you are. And let's dive into it. Not a ton to talk about today, but one national story and one more local. First, I won't spend a ton of time on it. There was another mass shooting at a school this week on Monday in Nashville. It was a private Christian school. Unfortunately, it ended up with 6 total people dead, including 3 children. The children were all 9 years old. Horrific, sad, scary, just depressing, and there's not a ton I can really say, but I wanted to touch on it because it's been in the news, and I think we should continue to mention these things and keep them in our minds. Not that we have to really ever wonder when the next one will be, and will we forget? No, because these happen all the time. Mass shootings, period, not just at schools. We are well over the mark of 1 per day for the new year. I think we are less than 100 days into the new year, and we have well over 100 mass shootings in this country, according to the Gun Violence Archive. And so it continues. And the reason I wanted to bring it up, not just to say, hey, this is in the news, I want to acknowledge it and reiterate that we have a violence problem in this country, a gun violence problem in this country. We refuse to do anything, no matter if you are a crazy gun person, and I say that somewhat jokingly, or someone who wants to abolish the Second Amendment. No matter what side you're on, we all agree no one wants these incidents to happen. As far apart as people may be on solutions, this is obviously something we all agree is horrific, and we wish we could stop it. The problem is we can't figure out ways to stop it, or maybe more accurately, the ways we know that will stop it are blocked. And let's be clear, no matter what, even the most extreme policies is never going to end violent crime, gun violence, school shootings, nothing. Nothing will, no matter how extreme, like I said, if the government could somehow magically get everyone's guns taken away and repeal the Second Amendment, something that'll never happen, but just hypothetically, somehow, some way, someone is going to either get a hold of a gun or guns or figure out how to make one on their own or get one from another country or whatever it may be. And there's still going to be gun violence. Obviously, if that would significantly lower the problem in this country, but it's not going to happen. But I'm using that extreme just to hit home on the point that I understand that nothing's going to stop it. And so I'm willing to listen to solutions. There's some I don't like, but hey, if they work and can stop at least one mass shooting without causing any other damage in other ways, I'll certainly listen to it. But we're seeing the same things we always see, the whole cycle, thoughts and prayers. Oh, it's too soon to talk about this. Oh, people talking about guns are politicizing this. Let the families mourn. And we're way past that. Obviously, this isn't like a situation that rarely happens. This happens frequently. Not just schools, but just shootings, period, in this country. And not just mass shootings. We have a lot of deaths that are not considered mass shootings because they don't involve, whatever the number is, 3 people or more, or 4 people or more. And we have a gun violence problem when it relates to suicide, as we talked about in the last episode, or maybe 2 episodes ago at this point. So it's multiple things. So it's frustrating, to go through that cycle again. It's frustrating to see no like good solutions be brought up, or the ones that are good are just immediately shot down. No pun intended. I shouldn't have used that language. Just sometimes you have sayings in your mind, and you're just so used to saying them, you don't realize what you're saying in relation to the news. But people are, if guns are mentioned at all, even if you're not talking about actually taking someone's guns away, there's a certain segment of this population that just immediately will say, nope, not listening, doesn't work. But what's more important, the lives of children, or you trying to win an argument, own the libs, and defend your side of the political aisle? Seriously, what's more important? And I wish we could work together to find solutions. But even this isn't just politicians either. It's people regurgitating things they hear online or read online or hear on cable news or whatever, biased website they look at, and there's a plethora of inaccurate information out there that people like to parrot. And, it's tough to see, and it's depressing, and it's hard because you want to argue with people and be like, no, that's not true. That's been debunked a million times. And this is what will actually stop it. And yeah, it's frustrating. And then you see people who say things like, oh, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Yeah, and it kills a lot of people quickly, people with guns versus people with any other weapon that we legally can get our hands on, especially people with assault style type guns or, automatic type weapons that can fire multiple bullets very, very quickly. So it's not the guns by themselves. It's not the person by themselves. It's the person getting a hold of a very deadly weapon. And then we talk about other countries. Everybody wants to talk about mental health. And for sure, this is a multifaceted problem. There's no doubt about that. But then it starts to wade into these tricky territories. When you start talking about, well, anyone who shoots someone, especially kids, is crazy. And I get that. Psychologically, yes, I get why people say things like that. There's something wrong with anyone who thinks it's okay to do those things. I get that. Doesn't mean that they have like an actual diagnosed mental illness. And that's a semantics thing. I get that. But when there's people out there who have actual mental illnesses, you're like kind of demonizing them. Not everybody who has a mental illness may go on to kill people in any fashion. So it gets a little tricky with that. And a lot of people just want to brush it off as these are crazy people, quote unquote. There's nothing you can do about it. So that's it, which I don't understand either. Okay, if you truly believe it's just mental health, and again, I believe that's certainly part of it, well, what do you suggest we do to help that? And there really isn't any suggestions, because any suggestions of improving mental health in this country will involve maybe a raise in taxes or a reallocation of funds. And no one wants to do any of that, of course, either. And they start, oh, you talking about universal health care? Oh, that's socialism. And, we get into this whole thing. And so then there's really no solution that anyone is actually willing to suggest. And you look at other countries, and our mental illness rates are no different than any other countries. So we're not more mentally ill than anywhere else. If you look at just violence, yes, we have a country that has a weird obsession with violence of all kinds, but we're not alone in that. Lots of countries you can look to, and they have segments of the population that are obsessed with violence and resort to violence to solve problems. This isn't an us problem either. So it's not, we're no different than all these other countries. So what's the difference? Why are we having so many more mass shootings and deaths by gun violence, period? Or in also deaths by suicide with gun violence? It becomes very apparent. Yeah, sure, there are some countries that do better with mental health care than we do, and there are countries that have universal health care so people can get that kind of help quicker and easier than they can here. But that's not all countries. Some countries have worse mental health or just, healthcare, period. But they still have far less gun deaths, and not just total, but per capita. No matter which way you slice it, the United States is by far the worst. So when you break all that down, that leaves one thing. It's the guns. And it's the easy access to guns specifically. Now, again, we have a Second Amendment. I get that. And I also think people should be allowed to purchase a gun to protect themselves and their family if they believe that that's what they need. So I'm not talking about taking away the guns. There's no doubt about it. If you took away all the guns, obviously that would stop gun violence almost completely. As I mentioned, of course, there'll still be some that happen, but I'm not suggesting that. But that is the difference between us and other countries, because there's nothing else. Mental health rates, no different. Different kinds of violent crime, not a big difference in most countries either. It's the guns, and it's the easy access to them. That's the difference. So what can we do about that without, as people always, defenders of the Second Amendment, always get up in arms about, this is just a ploy to eventually take away all our guns. Oh, you're just going to punish the good guys with guns, the legal gun owners and all that. And sure, okay, I get you being worried about that. So let's work together. It's clearly the guns. It's clearly the access to guns. So let's look at these people who are committing crimes with guns and figure out how could we have prevented them from getting guns in a way that doesn't, trample on their Second Amendment rights. And there are different ways to do things, some of which don't even involve taking guns away from people, but they would reduce gun violence, including deaths by suicide involving guns. Things like safe storage laws. That's not taking away anybody's guns. Holding people accountable who don't store their weapons safely and they're stolen. If you could get in trouble for having your weapon stolen and used in a crime because you didn't store it safely, you better believe people would start storing them safely. Red flag laws. People don't like those. They'd make that jumping conclusions, of, oh, well, just anybody could waltz into the police station or wherever and say, I don't want Billy Bob Jones to have a gun. He says he's going to kill people. And people are so afraid that someone's going to make a lie up about them that they're not going to be able to get their hands on a precious gun. But that's not really how that works. There has to be proof. A judge has to sign off on it. So it's not just based on hearsay. And so, again, none of us want this. And we can agree it's multifaceted. I agree. There is a mental health component to this, and there are ways that if people were getting proper help and could easily get proper help, that some of these instances, and again, I'm not just talking about mass shootings, just gun violence in general, some of these things would go away. But politicians, specifically Republicans, continue to shoot down measures that would increase funding for mental health services. So if you're saying it's a mental health issue, but then voting against things that would help you're not serious about helping. And I think that's what's really frustrating amongst everything else I've been discussing. The other really frustrating thing about this, and although it's somewhat predictable, that some people are trying to focus not on the deaths, not on guns, not on how to prevent these things. They're focusing on the shooter because reports at first were that the shooter is a woman. And so then people were like, again, they just like wanted to earn points or something. Oh, it's not a white male this time, is it? Guess that ruins the narrative. No, sure, there are people who make comments like that. That's not the narrative. Narrative is it's really easy for people in this country to get guns and guns that can kill a lot of people quickly, and it continually happens. I don't care about the gender of the person. And most people don't. And then it came out that, oh, this person might actually be a transgender woman. And so then that was what people wanted to focus on. And I've even seen people make the gross jump in logic that, oh, well, because they're trans, they're mentally ill. And that's what the problem is. Again, even if that were true and being trans is not a mental illness, that's been well established and studied, and medical professionals agree on that. But if it were true, you're not helping the mental health in any capacity by providing funding for programs, suggesting anything that would help. It's all a moot point, it just doesn't make any sense. So people are focusing on all those things, and I could go on and on. I've already talked about it longer than I wanted to, but it's on my mind today, and hearing all these horrible takes and reading these horrible takes online, it's so frustrating, especially when we do this over and over and over again. Speaking of bigotry and people wanting to harp on transgender folks, circling back on a story I told you about, you may remember a Charleston County School Board member by the name of Ed Kelly proposed a policy for the Charleston County School District that would prohibit, amongst other things, teachers asking students what their preferred pronouns were, giving their own preferred pronouns, and basically making it so people can talk about LGBTQ issues or trans people or pronoun usage in classrooms. And then he went on to say that, oh, I don't want to completely rule it out. I'm paraphrasing, I'm being sarcastic here, but I'm a good guy. I don't want to prevent kids from talking about things. But then he went on to say that, oh, if a kid has a psychiatric problem like this, they should be able to talk to a teacher who could then direct them to a professional to help them. So he gave the game away, as I said in the last episode, by claiming that, oh, no, kids can talk about it, if they're going through this psychological crisis, implying, again, that being trans or non-binary or whatever it may be is a mental illness. And it's not. And he showed at best his ignorance, at worst his bigotry. And that continued. I said, I'm like, look, this is clearly, I said bigoted, but again, could be ignorance. He may just not be educated on the topic, but that doesn't really excuse your bigotry. And lo and behold, some information comes out about this guy that allegedly some stuff he said that kind of proves my point. Not that I'm happy or gloating about that. But Mr. Kelly has been asked to resign from the Charleston County School Board after a woman alleged he publicly stated, during a recent conservative group chapter meeting that if his child's teacher came out as transgender, he would show up at the educator's doorstep with a gun. Cool. A Charleston County School Board member saying he wants to show up at a teacher's doorstep with a gun just for being transgender. Yeah, we're a little bigoted. And again, well, what do? He mentions violence and a gun. Like I said, this country has an issue with violence and guns. Now, granted, he didn't carry out this. He's probably just talking tough and wouldn't actually do that. Nonetheless, you have to take these things seriously. And if he did say it, it's wildly inappropriate. So he reportedly made these comments this past month during a Moms for Liberty meeting. We've talked about Moms for Liberty. This is this group that is masquerading as a parental rights organization when in reality they're using those things to further their bigoted agenda about race and LGBTQ topics. So anyway, he said this during a meeting, and supposedly he was sharing some story that a district teacher had asked students to call him Mr. instead of Mrs. during the middle of the year. And that's when he made the comment about the gun. And Kelly apparently also told that Moms for Liberty group in that meeting on March 16th that he had threatened to have the superintendent, Don Kennedy, fired if he didn't place the aforementioned teacher on administrative leave. So again, because a teacher came in and said, I want to be referred to as Mr. instead of Mrs., he threatened, in more or less, to show up at their house with a gun. and then also wanted the superintendent to fire the teacher. This is past ignorance at this point. So at the board meeting, someone who spoke, a local resident who was relaying the story, asked him to step down and said that, this is inappropriate for you to be on this board. Threatening the livelihoods of district employees is unacceptable conduct, no matter who you are threatening. The Post and Courier tried to talk to Kelly after the meeting. He claimed he would talk to them, but after they went into like an executive session, he came out and would only give them a written statement that said he is prohibited by policy to discuss what happened outside of the board because they talked about it in executive session. So at this point, Kelly is still on the board and is not talking about it, even though he said he would. So, yeah, that's kind of the gist of it for now. And we've talked about these things before, about how in the last episode I said, he's talking about, trans people, it's a psychological issue. It's not. However, trans, non-binary, and LGBTQ, any part of that community, especially youth, are more likely to have mental illness issues, including, suicidal ideation. But it's not because they're trans or non-binary or anything else. That's not why they are more likely to have those mental illnesses. It's the discrimination that they hear. It's the pushback they get when they just want equal rights. It is policies like Ed Kelly's that are being presented, and it has to be talked about in the news so people are aware of what's going on in the community. But kids see those things, and they see these debates happening online, on television, in print, whatever it may be, on the radio. And those types of things are what lead them to have higher rates of things like depression, anxiety, or thoughts of suicide. It's not because of who they are, it's because of how they're treated. And these are adults that are treating them so poorly. No, they're not directly going into one person's face and saying bigoted things. But when you're talking generally and trying to pass legislation that harms them and makes them feel like they are less than, that is what does that. This whole moms for really parental rights, protect the children. Some of the most vulnerable people in our society are children. And within that group, kids that identify as LGBTQ+, they're even more vulnerable than the general population of children. You don't care about those children. It's your bigotry. We've talked about this. And as I said in the last episode, I was like, this is just ignorance at best. And he showed, allegedly, based on these comments that he supposedly said at a Moms for Liberty meeting, he showed that that's true. He's not someone who deserves to be on a board, a school board, especially if what he said is true. Regardless of what you feel, you don't make threatening comments like that. A school board member shouldn't talk about showing up at someone's house with a gun. And again, this just ties into the school shooting, and it shouldn't. But it does, the school shooting in Nashville, because of the reports. And I should say at this point, we don't really know for sure. There's been a lot of conflicting reports. We don't really know what the shooter actually identified as. It's speculation so far. It may end up being true, but we don't really know. But it doesn't really matter, because that's not really the point. It's that this person is yet another in a long list of people that were legally, because we did find that out, that this person legally purchased 7 guns. Their parents said they didn't believe that they should have guns. But there's no red flag law in Tennessee. In fact, Tennessee has also recently passed multiple laws making it easier to get guns. On top of that, they've also passed legislation about drag shows. You know how many kids have been shot at a drag show in Nashville or Tennessee? 0. You know how many kids have been harmed at a drag show in Tennessee? 0. In just one day, 3 kids were murdered by someone wielding assault type guns, according to police. Their gender, their sexual identity, sexual preference, it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with it. And it's gross that people are trying to harp on that. And then in the face of these things, we have people like Ed Kelly who are trying to pass anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ not legislation, but policy in schools that are causing damage to children because you're making them feel less than, you're not making them feel included. And the school should be a safe space for all children. It's hard enough growing up. Don't get me wrong. A lot of us probably have great memories from childhood, but it's not easy. No matter how good your childhood is, it's not easy to grow up. You're always worried you're going to say or do something dumb. You're worried you're going to be, made fun of or bullied or, being embarrassed, especially in middle school and high school, is like, that's the worst fate you could have when you're that young, you think. It's hard enough growing up and going through all that stuff. Imagine being a part of a group that is constantly being maligned by school board members, parents, and other adults in the community and nationwide just because of who they are. We really need to get a grip as a country on all of this. And it's really sad and really disappointing. And sorry to be, talking about these things and going on a little long, but both have been on my mind because they are happening here in the news. And this is real life, that people are being affected by these things. And now you're seeing these people that were elected to school boards based on these silly parental rights claims. Now we're seeing who these people truly are and that they're unfit to lead. Allegedly, of course. Hope you enjoyed the episode despite the tone. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins for producing each and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every episode. You can support the podcast by going to patreon.com/holycitycenter or holycitycenter.com/shop. Please like, review, rate, subscribe to this podcast, whatever you can do on your platform. I would appreciate it. Hopefully, Friday's episode will be a little bit cheerier. It's just been a tough couple days with the news. And unfortunately, that happens a lot down here in South Carolina with some of these politicians and things that we have. But, just the way it is sometimes. Hopefully, we'll have better things to talk about on Friday. Until then, I hope you all stay safe and sane and can step away from the news a little bit if it's been bogging you down like it has been with me. Try to enjoy time with your family and friends. And until Friday, good night and good luck.